Can we trust this slaughter of meat? Can we try, if you are a rabbi and you write to somebody a bill of divorce, or you marry somebody off, or your marriage is in divorce is legitimate, all those kinds of things which have to do with being an Orthodox Jew, they become issues when Orthodoxy is redefined.
Yeah, but do you think that Orthodox is going to accept his new term?
There are people who will.
Yes.
Jews. Whatever it is, they accept it, since they accept it, so there's what
the only reason to accept that is saying, we don't need our principles and we can just do the halakha because we want to. It's just so that we don't have to do those halakhas which we don't want to. Otherwise, why would you accept those terms?
That's true. And many people use it as an excuse not to accept certain things. In other words, they'll say that certain things which seem to be part of Torah, not necessarily part of Torah.
That's a Reform philosophy, is do the halakhas that are meaningful to you. And then, those that you don't like or don't understand, don't do.
True. But that's what the Chiddush, the Chiddush, which he says that you can have Reform philosophy with Orthodox halakha and consider to be Orthodox. That's it.
I just want to understand.
Yes, go read his book. I heard it's a hot seller.
This left-wing movement is saying that there's no godly backing behind the halakha.
You don't have to believe that there's godly backing. There's no such belief in God.
Why don't you ever keep kosher? There was no godly backing. Keep your friends. You can work with your friends.
Yeah. I didn't say it's right. I said it's wrong.
No, I have no saying. I have nothing.
Well, to be fair, even with heretics, to be fair.
Yeah, isn't it?
What?
There's been community still.
No, because I think he actually believes in 30%. Just saying other people don't have to believe in that.
So what? So he's not going to die?
No, this is that.
Yeah, I understand. I think we do a halakha without the backing. That's why so many Reform people become bothered too. Because they say, why are we doing this if there's no backing? And then they learn more. Like if there's no God telling you what to do, why would you take on all these restrictions for that don't make any sense? Like why?
Well, you have to go back.
If you're not, you
have to go back in time really in order to understand this. Really, way off topic. We have to go back in time in order to understand. Go back to Moses Mendelssohn. Moses Mendelssohn was a scholar of the 18th century, and he was an Orthodox Jew. But he did not believe that a person who kept halakha, who's Jewish, received any more reward or any more spiritual benefit or accomplished more than a non-Jew who did not keep the mitzvot. In essence, what he says, Jews are burdened by having these mitzvot, which they were given Mount Sinai, and they're stuck with them. But they don't give them any specific benefits or any superiority over the non-Jews who didn't receive these mitzvot.
Kind of true.
What?
Sort of kind of true.
So the natural conclusion from that is that, why bother? I mean, the only reason there was a bother in that case is because it's totally unfair. If you're a fair-minded person, you'll rebel against such a system in which there is no advantage for keeping these mitzvos over somebody who doesn't have to keep these mitzvos.
Right, that's the point.
Higher people would say, oh no, this shows my love for Hashem. I don't need rewards in order to do these.
Most people don't really love Hashem, and most people do things because they have to do that.
Reward and punishment.
Yeah, punishment.
Right. So if you have to do it to get the same level, it might not be fair, but you can't change the system. You're not God.
True. But as a result of Moses Mendelssohn is considered to be, even though he himself was an Orthodox Jew, is considered to be the father of reform. Because if you undermine, and all of his kids converted to Catholicism, if you undermine Felix Mendelssohn, the famous composer, is his grandson, who of course wasn't Jewish. If you undermine the concept of sanctity, which doesn't really exist if you don't believe that there's any specific spirituality which Jews accomplish more by doing mitzvot than those who don't have mitzvot, then it really becomes superfluous. It just becomes a meaningless ritual which has no real significance, right? Isn't it?
It's very dangerous.
Well, it was very dangerous, and it was very dangerous result. Absolutely, that's what happened. What? Mark Shapiro.
It's the same thing.
It's a similar idea, right?
It already exists.
Right. So a similar idea. In other words, what's basically asserting is that there is no benefit or no advantage to your system of belief. So therefore, you only keep halacha because it's a legal system which has been imposed upon you, right? Regardless of whether you have a system of belief or don't have a system of belief. But as you said, the natural result of that That at some point along the line, it just becomes a burden, and either you start tinkering with it, or you discard it altogether.
Why would you keep a law system that's not really imposed on you because there is no punishment for it? You just keep the U.S. law system then, if you have that. If you didn't believe that there was anything to punish or reward you for what you're doing in mitzvahs, then just keep the
So
national
I'll
law.
tell you what he would say, although I'm not sure I can give you his email address. You can ask him if you want. But you go to the university's website and get his email address from there. But what he would say to you, I think, would be that even though the belief system is not required in order to be considered an Orthodox Jew, it does make sense. So therefore, at least on some level. So therefore, for example, reward and punishment is a logical construct, even if it's not required belief. So therefore, although it's not required to be an Orthodox Jew, when you die and come up to heaven, they will send you down to hell. You might not believe in that, but it'll happen anyway.
So he's saying it's true, but you're not required to believe in that to be an Orthodox Jew.
Exactly.
I think you read the Shema, and he said, I don't understand. I think you read the Shema, one thing he's like, the Shema is very clear.
What does the Shema say?
The Shema doesn't Shema say exactly that you have to know that if you do this, then everything will be okay, but if not, you have some problems.
It only says about this world, doesn't say about the world to come.
Okay, that's the whole
No, okay, so he just says, yeah, but it doesn't say you have to believe in it, it just says that this is what you have to do.
So he's basically leading Jews to Gehenna. Because because then you're taking, like Reform, like most of them are completely ignorant. So, what's true is true, and when they get up there, they'll say, oh, you didn't do this, but, you didn't know, so it's not so bad, as bad. So, but if he's telling Orthodox Jews that the same philosophy, and these Orthodox Jews who do know right now that it's true, and then say, oh, I don't have to believe it, okay, I won't. And then they go up, and they're a lot worse off than a Reform Jew even going up, because the Reform Jew was ignorant, but the Orthodox Jew knew what was going on.
True, but from his perspective, he's broadening the parameters of Orthodoxy. Meaning you can have somebody who can buy into a halachic system, even though he doesn't believe in the tenets which underlie it, and then he also become a halachic Jew, an Orthodox Jew, a rabbi, and do as he pleases and tinker with the
Someone who likes to fast a lot.
Yeah, that's the way.
I mean, it's the same mentality as someone who wants to take on voluntary fast every day.
It's kind of masochistic, right?
Yeah.
So that's true. Nevertheless, there are people who want to
Cultural diversity.
Right. So from Mordecai Kaplan, who founded Reconstructionism, what?
I never understood what that was.
It's a branch of, it's an offshoot, actually, of conservative Judaism. Conservative Judaism is based on the assumption that halacha, initially, it's based on the assumption that halacha is more flexible than the Orthodox would have it, because not all of it is divine, and it wasn't necessarily...
All itself is an interpretation. It's an interpretation of God.
Right. So therefore, it's flexible. Mordecai Kaplan took that a step further. He said, there is no God. But halacha is a nice thing because it's a cultural, it identifies Jewish culture throughout the ages, and it gives our civilization its unique character.
That's what Reconstructionist is?
So again, that's not Reconstructionism today. But that's what the original Reconstructionist philosophy was. So in essence, the Reconstructionists would keep the same halacha as an Orthodox Jew without the God behind it, right?
So that's what your friend's trying.
So he tells there is a God. It's just they don't believe in God. So there's different. Mordecai Kaplan tells there was no God. The famous joke about Reconstructionism, in which the Reconstructionist motto is, there is no God, and Mordecai Kaplan is his prophet. Islam. So what happened to Reconstructionism is that it became eventually, as it is today, a kind of convenient way to be a pagan within the confines of Judaism, or not in the contours of Judaism. And so Reconstructionists nowadays are very, generally speaking, touchy-feely, spiritual type people who they actually like demons, because demons are these spiritual things. They're kind of like similar to the witches who worship all these spiritual things which have to do with nature and so that.
So what's the difference between a Reconstructionist and a Reformer?
No, they're pagan. They don't. Their idea of God is subject to all sorts of machinations. I mean, they worship the They worship, the trees. They worship the forest. The forest, the Baal. From Reconstructionist perspective, worshiping the Baal would be a very Jewish thing because we find in Jewish history that lots of Jews worship the Baal. So therefore, this is a Jewish cultural norm, and to
I hope they all marry out.
Yeah, please go to Reconstructionist.
We don't really need them.
Yeah,
Those are Jews that we kind of. It's okay if they marry out.
That's unfortunate. I mean, some of them are very spiritual. Some of them really, but it's a self-generated spirituality. It's not generated by any specific, guidelines which are received, but rather by them. For example, Shekhinah is a big thing. The divine presence, because Shekhinah is, a feminine, so to speak, a feminine aspect of God. So that's very good because it gives all sorts of possibilities for feminist type worship. So that actually is a big thing by Reconstructionists.
So what are renewal Jews?
They're called it's basically
They're birthing a lot.
it's basically an offshoot of Reconstructionism. I mean, one of the major figures in the Reconstructionist movement in the later years, meaning after Mordechai Kaplan, is Zalman Schachter. Zalman Schachter was a Lubavitcher Chassid, and he was one of the first shluchim of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who then went astray. And he became more of, again, as I say, touchy-feely spiritual type guy. And he's a very interesting fellow because, he will, when he went to meet the Dalai Lama, he went in full Hasidic regalia with the Strymel and the Bekesher, the whole business, even though he really doesn't, he's not a Chassid by any stretch of the imagination. But, he's the head of the Jewish contingent, going to meet the Dalai Lama, who's the head of the Buddhist contingent, and he'll dress accordingly. So we actually, from that perspective, you could incorporate, since you're Reconstructionist, you could incorporate a lot of Buddhist practices into your religious observance, and it would be fine, because, whatever makes you feel spiritual and good about yourself is something which is inherently good from that perspective. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific Jewish origin. It can be even a pagan origin. It doesn't matter, because there's no intellectual definition or requirement of Judaism. It's only spiritual, and therefore whatever makes you feel more spiritual is good. That's really the renewal.
So then can anyone can non-Jew be a renewal? I mean, whatever.
Yeah,
Real Jewish, you are
Because you're saying that it's all based on which means that you don't have to be born Jewish to be a...
Of course not. There are no hard and fast conversion requirements. Not to mix or have a bris milah in order to be a Reconstructionist Jew. It doesn't work that way. So, it doesn't matter, really.
Is it quite an offshoot of that?
So, there's no offshoot of Orthodoxy.
So what's their shtick? What's their...
Don't sit down and bring it.
No, I think that their main shtick is that they have watered down Kabbalah to the point that it is usable by people even if they're not really fluent. And they have adopted all sorts of strange practices to make money, like selling Kabbalah water, holy water, and Kabbalah necklaces, and other types of things in which spiritual energy is infused, Kabbalah t-shirts. If you go to the website, all this kind of stuff, which they believe channel Kabbalistic energy, regardless of whether you're actually from or not. But if you wear the t-shirts, you're
books for a little
black
bit.
or Jewish, right? Yeah.
I was trying to read one of the books from their center, and I didn't know it was from their center that I thought it looked like an interesting book. I was 30 pages into it, just like, what? I did not know what they were talking about. It was just like convoluted nonsense, it seemed like. I don't know what the heck they were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have not read any of their books, but that's my understanding of the movement is that's what it's based on. My uncle, the prominent Lubavitch Chassid, his name is Emmanuel Shachar. He came out against the Kabbalah Center in Toronto, where they're very great, and he said it's a cult, and he was actually sued by them.
I heard it was a cult.
What?
I heard it was a cult.
Yeah, it is. I think he won the lawsuit because he proved that it is a cult.
Yeah.
So whatever that means, he proved that it's a cult type of organization. The definition of a cult is where there's one personality with whom, if you're affiliated with that person, then you get, all the spiritual benefits.
By every other Hasidic group would also be.
Yes, that's true. But the difference I tell you between Lubavitch and a standard cult. Then a standard cult, the understanding is if you don't accept the cult's leader and the cult's doctrines, you have no way of achieving salvation. Lubavitch actually believes that you can accomplish salvation even though you're not a Lubavitcher. Right? Now you get much more salvation by through the Bible. You will accomplish salvation even if you are not a Lubavitcher. So that is there's still that, what's the word I'm looking for? That broad-minded, that they're willing to accept absolute salvation without...
All Hasidus in different groups. They have their Rebbe and they connect spiritually through him, and that's how...
Right. It's interesting that most Hasidic groups don't believe that their Rebbe is the only way by which one can accomplish optimum salvation. Whereas Lubavitch believes that their Rebbe is the only way through which one can achieve optimum salvation, although one can achieve it in other ways as well. Okay, well, the question is, what is optimum? Maximum is certain, but obviously, Lubavitch Rebbe held that Moshe Feinstein was a great tzaddik and a great poet, and he showed him a lot of deference and respect. So clearly, he doesn't have to be a Lubavitcher in order to be a great.
I heard that, in the Kabbalah side, there's some Orthodox rabbis that are really part of that.
Actually, I think all the rabbis are Orthodox.
Yeah, I met the head of it. He walks around wearing a mini kippah. Black and white. What's their religion?
Yeah, officially they're all Orthodox. They don't claim to be non-Orthodox.
So they keep the halacha?
The rabbis do. Yeah.
Not the members.
Not necessarily.
So where are these rabbis coming from? Are they just taking quotes out of context from the Zohar and trying to put it down?
What they managed to do is to divorce the concept of Kabbalistic energy from the concept of halachic Judaism, which is, of course, this application of Kabbalah. Kabbalah is something which functions within the halachic system and only works if you keep Torah and mitzvot the right way. But their philosophy, what they're trying to spread is the philosophy that Kabbalah is like magic, and therefore works regardless of whether you buy into the entire system or not. That's their main.
That book is an Orthodox rabbi who wrote this book, and you're saying some very interesting things that, the way most people pray is he considered idol worship, because he said no one has the proper intent. And therefore, when people pray, it's meaningless and it actually angers God. And it says, the real way to do it is to sit there and meditate and concentrate on the infinite energy that is everywhere or something like that. He basically was saying that the way that most people do things is considered, just nothing, worthless, except unless you do Kabbalah and stuff.
Right, that is their perspective. It's a very new age type of thing.
So how would you learn real Kabbalah? If you wanted to go into very high spiritual Kabbalistic things, what's the correct road to do that? If you don't go to the Kabbalah Center and you're not a Chassid.
The best book on Kabbalah written in the English language is Inner Space by Rabbi R.A. Kaplan. It's an extremely hard book to read. It's very difficult. I once listened to a book on tape, Stephen Hawking's The 360 of Time, and it's like child's play compared to Inner Space. It's really much easier to understand than Inner Space. Inner Space is a very, very difficult book, and if you want to go right to the top, that's the place to go. In the English language,
that's legitimate Kabbalah.
It's tough, it's very hard. It's not touchy-feely easy stuff. There's a lot of minute and arcane stuff you got to know. It's not so simple. So, that would be the way you would approach it from.
What's the beginner's book?
Real Kabbalah for beginners.
You can read his book, Meditation in the Kabbalah. That's kind of watered down. That's easy reading Kabbalah.
So if we're in a bookstore and we see Kabbalah books, how do we know which one is from a viable, real, this is real Kabbalah, real stuff?
You have to assume that none of them are any good.
Versus fluffy stuff.
You have to assume none of them are any good.
You have to assume that?
Yeah. There were scholars of Kabbalah like Gershom Scholem and Moshe Yizel who weren't believers but viewed Kabbalah as a body of knowledge and did master some of the concepts. But our premise about Kabbalah is that if you approach it as a body of knowledge without regarding it as being holy, then you're missing the whole boat. You can't really have an understanding of Kabbalah unless you treat it as a system by which one accomplishes sanctity, not simply as a body of knowledge. The truth is, they're all sort of like that, but especially Kabbalah has to be approached in that vein, otherwise it can't be understood.
But Hasidism sort of takes Kabbalah down to the common man's level.
Well, it's not exactly taking Kabbalah down to the common man's level. What Hasidus does is takes Kabbalistic concepts and makes them popularize them, but it's not the same system as Kabbalah. It's very similar, but it's not the same system as Kabbalah.
So who actually studied, where would you go to, if you're, older, if I was, 45 or something, and I wanted to go to yeshiva and, really learn Kabbalah,
The yeshivas seem fun, they did.
The Kabbalah yeshivas?
Yeah, one for Sephardim, which is called Beit El, one for Ashkenazim, which is called Shalar Shemayim.
I missed the Beit El guys, they're not...
Which Beit El does to me?
This is coming from Beit El.
No, Beit El.
It should be called kind of.
They're not from your Beit El. Maybe they're from Beit El in the West Bank. Yeah, not Beit El. Beit El Islam is different. The real legitimate Kabbalah institution. The thing is that, Kabbalah can be studied the same way because Gemara is studied. It doesn't necessarily have to be studied like, you don't have to necessarily meditate and become, go off to flying through the world. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of profound knowledge in and of itself without practicing, meditative techniques and stuff like that.
Study the Zohar.
What?
Study the Zohar.
Yeah, you can study the Zohar. You can read the Zohar and you can master it, and you will still not become a practical Kabbalist. Just have another knowledge of another area of Torah.
What do you think of the English translations of the Zohar? I seem like a few of them. So.
I don't know if they're any good. I don't know. I don't know.
But the Kabbalah Center has one, and they said theirs is the only one. There's a couple of
them. But there's a Kabbalah Center that does disseminate the Ashlag Hebrew translation of the Zohar, which is considered to be a legitimate translation. Rabbi Berg Sr., who must be a very old man by now, was a student of Rabbi Ashlag, who was a legitimate Catholic who lived in the shrine in the middle of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. So Ashlag has translation of the Zohar is considered to be a legitimate translation.
Translation to English?
No, it's in the Hebrew.
You translate from Hebrew to Hebrew?
From Aramaic.
It's Aramaic.
Oh, it's in Aramaic?
Yeah.
Very good.
So Rabbi Berg Sr., or Dr. Berg, as he's called, is not considered to be a legitimate exponent of that philosophy. Any other questions, since we haven't done this is an open question.
So when you open something down, it's probably...
Well, I seriously feel that these open guys granted will cause a rift in orthodoxy. It seems like something that orthodoxy
There's always that philosophy already.
But the people who have an agenda will accept it. Not only will they accept it, they'll advocate it. And I was told that Wally has a major Spartan sale every year.
Yeah.
And I was told that the biggest bestseller by far and away at the YU Spartan sale was Mark Shabrier's new book. So,
I understand why don't they just
make it intellectual curiosity and bestseller status. Well, those people are not intellectually curious. But most people just buy books because
they want to bought a brief history of time and never read it.
That may be, but I don't think that's the case in why you find stuff. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're not going to do that. But my sense is that it is
but our sense is that philosophy already sort of exists because if
but it hadn't been intellectually based. Nobody's actually written like a Bible of that philosophy.
Right, but I mean, like for instance, if I'm holding all the halachic things and I keep Shabbos and everything, but I don't want to believe in God, and I want to go to a place where there's Jews who accept that notion of doing what I want of halakha and not believing in God. I could just go to a Reform shul somewhere. And then the Reform say do all the mitzvahs that you want if you feel that they're meaningful to you, that you don't have to believe in God. And so that it seems to me that this philosophy already exists out there. I don't know why it would cause such a problem.
It's not as different. You see, the people who have this philosophy, they know there is really only one legitimate form of Judaism. And they want within that legitimate form of Judaism to achieve recognition. They don't feel that they know they themselves because they were brought up this way, because philosophically they believe it. They regard Reform Judaism and Conservative Judaism as not legitimate. Right? What they're trying to do is stake out a position in Orthodoxy, which will have intellectual legitimacy, and therefore grant them the legitimacy of Orthodoxy for whatever they want to do. That's what I'm trying to say. But then it's a psychological thing.
But then it wouldn't be legitimate Orthodoxy.
They want to expand legitimate Orthodoxy. That's their
thing. It's not legitimate anymore.
But they want to claim that it is, because they want to bring much of intellectual sources, because here's what Mark Shapiro is trying to do. Mark Shapiro is trying to go back to medieval sources and demonstrate that the boundary of what's to be Orthodox is not over here, where we previously thought it was, but is way out there. And therefore, all these things speak of the
children's children will still be holding the halakha. Their parents saying, "We don't believe in God, but we like doing these things."
They're not that far-sighted. So you take into account what's going to happen in several generations from now. Yeah.
If I may, the agenda of this group that you've identified, what are the things that they want to do to include within the ambit of orthodoxy? I mean, is there a top 5 list, a top 3 list?
The most of the things have to do with women's issues. It usually is where they focus their attack, so to speak. on women's issues, like, women's ordination, women having their own prayer services, women's Torah studies. But there's also another issue, which is, it takes a long time to explain, but there is, I once had a debate with a fellow by the name of Rabbi Dov Linzer. Rabbi Dov Linzer is the head of a yeshiva called Chovevei Torah. Chovevei Torah is a break-off from YU. It's a break-off from YU on the left. And his yeshiva, together with several other institutions, small institutions, Israel and America, have an interesting philosophy and which has two manifestations.
Avi Weiss did it.
Avi Weiss yeshiva, he's the yeshiva. He was the founder of the yeshiva. One of them, with which our debate centered, is the concept of how to approach halacha, and whether you assume that a posek had personal bias in ruling the way he did. For example, the issue we debated is whether the poskim who had different opinion as to whether you can enter a mosque or not were motivated by their halachic perspectives or by their sociological perspectives. Meaning that the Tzitz Eliezer was a great posek from the Ashkenazi camp, says it's forbidden to enter mosques. Everybody says it's forbidden to enter churches, the sanctuary of the church. President by the one who's allowed to enter the sanctuary of a mosque. So the Tzitz says it's forbidden. Well, Rabbi Yosef says it's permitted. Now, the way Rabbi Linzer wanted to explain this argument is that the Tzitz Eliezer is of European origin, and the Europeans equate, therefore, Islam with Christianity. And therefore, just like they forbade entering churches, they forbade entering mosques. Whereas Rabbi Yosef is of Sephardic origin, and the Sephardim lived among the Muslims, and they distinguished, therefore, between the Muslims and the Christians, and therefore he permitted entering mosques as opposed to entering churches. In my opinion, this is preposterous. You read the response of the Tzitz Eliezer and the Rabbi Yosef, you see quite clearly what they're based on. The Tzitz Eliezer quotes Iran. Iran is a classic Rishon. Everybody agrees he's up there as a major source. Iran says it's forbidden to enter mosques. He says Islam is idolatry. It doesn't believe in the Trinity, and they don't have any idols. Yes, but he says the veneration which they have for Muhammad is so great that they can't claim that they don't worship him, they don't regard him as a deity. They can say that he's not a deity, but they venerate him far more than would be legitimate if they wouldn't regard him as a deity. That's what the Ran writes. So therefore you can't enter a mosque. That's what we ever shown the Ran who says you can't enter a mosque. Ran was a big man, and Paul thought like the Ran. Well, Rabbi Yosef says no, not necessarily. True, the Ran said that, but the Rambam never says this in halacha. The Rambam says explicitly that you can't enter a church, and that Christianity is Avodah Zarah, but he doesn't regard Islam as being Avodah Zarah. And therefore, even though he didn't say either way, but our assumption is, since he explicitly said Christianity is Avodah Zarah and not Islam, that he would argue with the Rambam, with the Ran. And since he would argue with the Ran, so therefore, even though the Ran is great, the Rambam, everybody agrees, is greater. So therefore, we pass in like the Rambam who omitted such a halacha. So really, it's a kind of dry technical argument. But from Rabbi Linzer's perspective, this is actually, there's bias involved. Now this leads to a revolutionary approach. It means that you can go back and look at the earlier authorities and decide when they were biased and when they were not, and change halacha accordingly. And another example which he gave, which I couldn't believe, but he gave it, is we know there's a very big mafla. This is between the Tosfos and the Rambam as to whether women can make a bracha on mitzvahs as non grama, on mitzvahs which are time contingent. For example, can women make a bracha when they shake lulav? So we Ashkenazim hold they can, because we follow Rabbi Yonatan. And the Sephardim hold they cannot, because they follow the Rambam. Because Rabbi Yonatan holds that when it says in the bracha, Asher Tirushanim Mitzvosot V'Tzibanu, that God has sanctified us and commanded us, it doesn't necessarily refer specifically to the person who's performing the mitzvah, or a person who's Jewish people. So therefore, even though a woman is not commanded specifically to do the mitzvah, nevertheless, she's to make the bracha because it refers to the totality of the Jews. Whereas the Rambam holds that the bracha, Asher Tisham Tosavot Tivanu, we sanctified and commanded must refer specifically to the person who's fulfilling the mitzvah. If it doesn't for that person, so it's a bracha b'Torah, it's not a permissible bracha. But Rabbi Linzer said that the difference of opinion is based on the fact that the Rabbeinu Tam was from northern European countries where they had more progressive attitudes towards women, while the Rambam was from North African countries where they had a more regressive attitude towards women. So therefore, from Rabbeinu Tam's perspective, since women are, were held in higher esteem, so to speak, they were allowed to make the bracha. But from Rambam's perspective, where women were held in lower esteem, they were not allowed to make the bracha. What?
But their reasons are stated clearly.
Exactly. So this is kind of like deconstructionist approach, right? You can deconstruct the posting and say, well, they might write X, Y, Z, but really what underlies their fact is A, B, C, right? Which, again, to my mind, is preposterous and it's very dangerous. So as a result, you can go back and look at any fact and say, well, he was biased. He doesn't say anything about the bias. Oh, we know he was biased. So therefore, we can go back and, thoroughly undermine many things and change the outlook of those issues.
But it'd still be fundamental things you couldn't change. You couldn't change the bill, you couldn't change, certain...
That's what you think. And that, another thing that they do, which is related to that, which I said, which initially was going to debate this topic, but I said, you're going to lose on this topic, so we decided not to debate it, was their attitude of the way they learn Gemara is significantly different than the way we learn Gemara. It's directly related. When we learn Gemara, we regard the text of the Gemara as being made up of the final editing of Ravina Ravashi. According to the Gemara, what is considered to be the deliberations of the Amoraim, each of which is considered certified by Ravina Ravashi to be part and parcel of the chain of tradition and body of knowledge which makes up the Gemara. They don't learn that way. They try and peel back the Gemara and, again, deconstructionist. They try and find the layers in the Talmud. Meaning there are certain things which were stated by certain Amoraim, which then were changed by other Amoraim, and then there's the Gemara, the stam of the Gemara. The Gemara's flow itself, which is not attributed to any specific Amora, which is rather kind of like the connective tissue between the statements, which also is somebody else. And their perspective is that certain statements are more authoritative, because they're attributed, and certain statements are less authoritative, particularly if they're not attributed. And therefore, when they start going through a Gemara, they start trying to peel away the layers and decide which layers were authentic, which layers were not authentic, which layers have more validity, which layers have less validity, which layers are really non-Jewish influence. Like we wanted to do a debate on how much of marriage really comes from the code of Hammurabi, and actually is not of Jewish origin, but filtered into the Gemara. And how much of the halachos of marriage comes from the code of Hammurabi and are not of Jewish origin, but filtered into the Gemara, and how if you peel back the layers, you are able to find that. So I said, you don't want to debate that with me. And you didn't want to debate that with me. But that is, of course, also as part of this. It's not the bias issue so much as trying to create layers in text in which layers have never been clearly identified, nor even, ever assumed to exist.
They're trying to use modern rules of construction for something dangerous.
Right, that's a very successful way of putting it. But also it has great dangers, because then you begin to treat Talmud like not the body of law, which it actually is, or the blindly inspired law, but like any text you're using in English literature class, right? And you start treating it the same way you would treat, say Shakespeare. And then that will lead to all sorts of possibilities of manipulating the halacha and kind of identifying halacha. Well, this was said by this. This is not authoritative. This is stated in this way by this person, this layer, and therefore it's not ramification for Kedera limits.
But wouldn't it not matter since Kol Yisrael accepted the Gemara that was the last thing that all Kol Yisrael accepted as binding on them?
They don't accept that.
They don't think that.
They don't think
they just accepted the Gemara.
It's binding, but only after you use modern academic tools to figure out what is actually Gemara.
We never had modern academic tools for thousands of years, and we accepted the Gemara.
True. But you don't convince me.
They don't care about that argument?
No. Yes.
So what would you've heard of Drisha, right?
Yeah.
So what is that? Is that part of their group, sort of? Or?
Absolutely.
The guy who teaches it? Like, who are the rabbis who teach that?
All the same. Same people. There's like a coterie, is that the right word? About
Deconstructionist?
deconstructionists, about 10 or 20 deconstructionists who are populating all of these institutions together. Like,
some people of the party yeshiva, you know.
well, in Pius, not everybody is officially Orthodox. I think in Drisha, officially everybody is Orthodox. Pius is a non-denominational institution. Drisha recently was considered to be Orthodox. I don't know if it is anymore, but once upon a time it was halachic based.
He's identified feminism and modern construction. Any other elements of this movement?
That's just the beginning. We don't know where it's going to end. That was the impetus for creating a lot of these things. But eventually, we don't know how far we'll go, and obviously it has to do with whatever issues are relevant at the time. You know, knowing Orthodoxy so far has dared to assert that homosexual marriage is legitimate, right? Mm-hmm. But who knows? You know, someday somebody might deconstruct with the right text and come out with the right bias, and then, this is also good, you know, so on and so forth. So you don't know where these. Who knows? This is just the beginning, and this is a movement which really only began within the last 10 years.
It's interesting because, like, my sister goes to Krishna, she said some of the people there, like, it's a very interesting situation because they're deconstructing all these halakhas and saying, oh, this is so biased against women, this is because, and that in those days they were so biased against women, this and that, and they're just like complaining about deconstructing it, but at the end of the day they still follow all the laws because it's the halakha. And so I said, well, why do you want to make yourself angry? Like, you're just going to make yourself more and more angry, but you're still going to do it anyway. So if you're still going to do it anyway, why don't you find ways to be happy about it rather than be angry about it?
Right, it's kind of a Mendelssohn type approach. In other words, even though we hate it, nevertheless we have to do it because that's the way it is. Eventually, if you hate it enough, then you're not going to do it anymore. Right. So okay, guys, give me back the sheets. Maybe someday we'll get back to this topic. She was supposed to be talking about opening other people's mail.